The South American drug cartels rose to prominence as the world's leading producers of drugs, particularly cocaine, in the 1980s. Drug trafficking has increased to dangerous levels worldwide as a result of the rise of the cartels, which has also created major political conflicts between the United States of America and South American nations like Colombia, Bolivia, and Peru. The early and late 1970s saw Colombia become the center of some of the most deadly and sophisticated drug trafficking groups, which gave rise to the foundations of South American cartels. In the past 40 years, what began as a tiny cocaine smuggling organization has grown into a multinational cocaine empire. Today's traffickers have access to sufficient funds to construct highly advanced smuggling infrastructure and ultra-equipped laboratories, or to buy islands or submarines equipped with cutting-edge equipment similar to that found by the Colombian authorities a few years ago. However, the traffickers' initial objectives were far more modest. Halfway through the 1970s, South American drug dealers started smuggling tiny amounts of cocaine into the U.S. in briefcases. Back then, the drug could be manufactured in secret jungle labs for $1,500 per kilogram, and it could be sold for $50,000 per kilogram on American streets. It is easy to rationalize the rapid expansion of organizations at such a profit. The spectacular numbers have drawn a diverse group of individuals to the cocaine trade. The Ochoa brothers, who came from a strong background and had farms and studs, and the ruthless commander, Pablo Escobar, a street thug who believed the criminal enterprise would be known as the Medellin Cartel, were two of the most well-known names in the frivolous world of South American cartels. Medellin Cartel. The Medellin Cartel was a network of drug traffickers and suppliers that originated in the Colombian city of Medellin. During the 1970s and 1980s, the cartel was active in Colombia, Bolivia, Peru, Central America, the United States, Canada, and even on the continent of Europe. Together with the Ochoa Jorge brothers, Luis, Juan David, and Fabio, Pablo Escobar founded and controlled it. The cartel brought in more than $60 million per day during its heyday. According to some estimates, Medellin created tens of billions, and probably even hundreds of billions, of dollars in total throughout the course of its existence. Specially organized groups of Americans, Canadians, and Europeans were established by the Medellin Cartel with the sole objective of delivering tons of cocaine to the USA, Europe, and Canada. The spies and informants found a lot of organizations. The federal anti-narcotics forces were quickly assigned to supervise a group as soon as the authorities learned of its dubious activity. The High Court received evidence, which led to charges being brought against individuals found guilty as well as their detention and sentencing. However, relatively few South American cartel leaders were apprehended as a result of these operations. The fruits of the operations were non-Colombians who worked with the cartels. Like those called before the courts, the majority of Colombians were arrested. They either lived or traveled within Colombia prior to the charges becoming arrests. The Colombian National Police, trained and supported by Delta Force and CIA troops, had nonetheless captured, tracked down, or even killed the majority, if not all, of cartel fugitives prior to 1993. Fear of extradition. The establishment of an extradition agreement between the United States and Colombia was perhaps the largest danger to Colombian cartels and all traffickers in Latin America. This gave the South American nation the ability to extradite any citizen who was accused of selling drugs to the USA so that he might face justice for his crimes there. The drug traffickers suddenly had very little access to their local authority and influence in the US. In a trial there where the judges weren't paid would probably result in jail time, which posed a serious dilemma for the cartels. The avid supporters of the extradition accord included Rodrigo Lara Bonilla, the Minister of Colombian Justice, Jaime Ramirez, a police officer, and a number of Supreme Court justices. The cartels, on the other hand, began to wriggle into the trap and applied severe pressure on these supporters of the cause. As a result of the attacks on the police, the authorities suffered significant casualties, forcing some of the most significant drug lords to flee Colombia. They also sent remote orders for the primary proponents of the extradition deal to be killed. When the Supreme Court judges refused to abandon the pact, the cartels even threatened to kill them. Threats were not taken seriously. A short time after, 35 members of the heavily armed M19 guerrilla organization stormed the Supreme Court building, sparking the November 1985 siege of the Palace of Justice. The army and police attempted to rescue the hostages, but the operation was tragically unsuccessful because several of them were killed in the gunfire. According to others, the very cartels who were attempting to frighten the Supreme Court were responsible for the attack. In Colombia, there was a long-lasting discussion on this issue. In an effort to thwart the potential extradition of its members, the cartel Medellin assassinated presidential candidate Luis Carlos Galán on August 18, 1989, and proclaimed complete and utter war on the Colombian government. The plan involved separating citizens from the government and frightening them. Numerous terrorist acts by the cartel have been launched against civilian and state targets. The cartel orchestrated a number of assassinations around the nation as a punishment. Escobar and his allies were extremely clear that if someone continued to oppose them, they would kill him along with his entire family. A rough estimate of 3,500 people, including more than 500 police officers, were assassinated during the Medellin cartel's heyday of killings. The brutality committed in the cartel's name resulted in its arrest in direct opposition to both its rival, the Cali cartel, and its own dark influences, which sparked the rise of the mafia empire. The growth of the Cali cartel and the demise of the Medellin cartel at the end of the 1980s, culminating in Pablo Escobar's murder in 1993, were supported by corrupt government officials and soldiers who were originally employed by Medellin. These influences came from both inside and outside of Colombia. Escobar was one of several cartel members that were tracked down and assassinated by the Colombian National Police. The Medellin cartel, once the most powerful and feared by the entire globe, vanished when the majority of its members were slain or put in prison. The beliefs of his adversaries from the Colombian city of Cali, the Rodriguez Orihuela brothers, and Santa Cruz, London, contributed to the demise of the Medellin cartel in part. Compared to those from Medellin, those from Cali were more subdued and less noisy. Smuggling has been organized as a sophisticated company, and the proceeds have been reinvested in legal ventures, which they have later grown to great heights. As the battle between the two cartels grew increasingly brutal, the Cali cartel began assaulting the Medellin cartel, and particularly Pablo Escobar. In the end, they established the criminal group Peeps, People Against Pablo Escobar, which specializes in hunting out his residences and his business associates. The Cali cartel has also begun providing information on activities at Pablo Escobar's warehouses to the Colombian police and the prosecutor's office. When the Colombian authorities were able to locate Escobar, he had been living alone and on the run since 1993. The Cali cartel. The Cali cartel, which is the biggest cocaine cartel in the world and is centered in the Colombian city of Cali, is undoubtedly the most contentious and talked about criminal organization in recent memory. More than 60% of the cocaine imported into America has been the result of this cartel. When narcotics aren't flown or shipped over American waterways, they're passed at the border with Mexico. Some people think that transporting narcotics by land is safer and less dangerous than using the air or water. The Cali cartel is involved in every aspect of the drug trade. The coca plant is where cocaine first appeared. Cartels cultivate or purchase this plant from local breeders in Peru, Bolivia, Ecuador, and Colombia in order to eventually refine it into the very potent narcotic known as cocaine. The Cali cartel has adapted to terrorist organizations' methods by dividing itself into cells, with each cell having minimal knowledge of the other components of the equipment. They employed several U.S. attorneys and lawyers known for their ability to analyze parquet floor motions. In order to create communication equipment that could not be eavesdropped, they hired and trained engineers from the top of the industry and began employing technology as a standard tool in their operations. Their companies also grew and profited. The South American cartels started shipping more cocaine to Europe and Asia as the demand for cocaine in the U.S. started to drop. They are said to have powerful domains in Colombia and a long list of successful significant commercial ventures. The Cali cartel was ruled by savvy businesspeople who made significant investments in political safety. Hundreds of congressmen and senators have been accused of collecting funding for their election campaigns from the Rodriguez brothers Orejuela throughout the course of the previous 10 years, along with former President of Colombia, Ernesto Samper. The leaders of Cali were subsequently apprehended in several cases. They were taken into custody in the middle of the 1990s and are now in prison serving 10 to 15-year terms. The Rodriguez brothers were extradited to the United States in 2006 and pled guilty to charges of conspiring to bring cocaine into the country from Miami, Florida. Following their admission, they consented to give over $2.1 billion in assets. They were not obligated to assist in any more investigations under the agreement, though. The discovery of assets resulting from their cocaine trafficking was entirely their responsibility. The Drogas La Rabaja drugstore company was raided by Colombian authorities, who replaced 50 of its 4,200 employees because they were supporting the interests of the Cali cartel. On May 31, 2022, Gilberto Rodriguez Orejuela, 83, passed away at a prison medical facility in Butner, North Carolina. Today. However, the younger lieutenants of these commanders started to understand that massive groups were now more open to attacks from the American and Colombian authorities. They formed smaller and easier to control groups, and they started to compartmentalize their responsibilities. A group was just doing drug smuggling from Colombia to Mexico. Another group controlled jungle labs. Another was concerned with the transportation of coca leaves from fields to laboratories. They are known to have clear links between Colombian Marxist guerrilla groups and the cocaine trade. In exchange for the substantial sums that traffickers pay the group, the guerrillas in Colombia guard their field laboratories. Instead, it's thought that right-wing paramilitary organizations in Colombia are in charge of the fields, labs, and certain smuggling routes.